This is the story of one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history, a case that has baffled investigators for over 9 decades and continues to raise disturbing questions about what truly happened in the isolated valleys of western Pennsylvania. Before we begin, I invite you to leave a like on this video. Your support helps us continue bringing these forgotten stories to light, stories that demand to be told, examined, and most importantly, remembered. What you are about to hear is documented through police records, newspaper archives, personal correspondence, and testimonies preserved in the Historical Society of Westmoreland County. This is not speculation. This is not folklore. This is the meticulously researched account of the Ravenhood family and what occurred during that bitter winter of 1933. Some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Some doors should never be opened. This is one of them. In January 1933, the Ravenhood family resided in a 3-story Victorian home approximately 14 miles northeast of the small town of Millworth, Pennsylvania. The property, known locally as Ravenhood Manor, sat isolated at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by dense pine forests, and accessible only by a single bridge crossing the frozen Blackstone Creek. The family consisted of 7 individuals. At its head was Cornelius Ravenhood, age 53, a retired railroad superintendent, known throughout the county as a methodical, practical man. His wife, Margaret Ravenhood, 48, was a former schoolteacher. Their 5 children ranged in age from 14 to 28. Thomas, the eldest, who worked as an accountant in Pittsburgh but visited frequently. Eleanor, 25, unmarried and living at home. The twins, Samuel and Sarah, both 22, and young Daniel, just 14. According to census records from 1930, the Ravenhoods were a respectable, unremarkable American family. Cornelius owned the property outright, valued at $3,200. They attended the Presbyterian Church in Millworth every Sunday without fail. Margaret volunteered at the town library. The children were described by neighbors as polite, well-educated, and entirely ordinary. Between January 15th and January 22nd, 1933, 6 members of the Ravenhood family died, under circumstances that have never been adequately explained. The official investigation concluded within 3 weeks. The case was closed. The findings were filed away in the basement of the Westmoreland County Courthouse, where they gathered dust for nearly 30 years. But the official explanation does not account for the contradictions in the evidence. It does not explain the testimonies that were dismissed. It does not address the physical impossibilities documented at the scene, and it certainly does not explain what continues to happen at that property today, 91 years later. The sequence of events began on the evening of January 15, 1933, when a severe winter storm struck western Pennsylvania. According to meteorological records preserved at the National Weather Service archives in Silver Spring, Maryland, temperatures dropped to -18 degrees Fahrenheit, with snowfall accumulating at a rate of 3 inches per hour. The storm would continue for 5 consecutive days. Thomas Ravenhood had arrived at the family home 3 days earlier on January 12th, for what his employment records at Westinghouse Manufacturing indicate was a planned 2-week vacation. In a letter dated January 13th, 1933, addressed to his colleague Robert Finch and currently housed in the Pennsylvania State Archives, Thomas wrote, "The house is warm, Mother has been cooking endlessly, and Father is in excellent spirits. I had forgotten how quiet it is out here. No automobile horns, no factory whistles, just the wind in the pines and the creek running beneath the bridge. I think I shall sleep better here than I have in months." The Ravenhood family was entirely self-sufficient on their property. According to delivery records from Millworth General Store, Cornelius had ordered supplies on January 10th. 200 pounds of flour, 50 pounds of sugar, canned goods, lamp oil, coal for heating, and various sundries. The proprietor, Harold Guthrie, noted in his ledger that this was standard procedure for the Ravenhoods before winter storms. They typically remained on the property until the roads cleared. The bridge connecting their property to the main road was a wooden structure built by Cornelius himself in 1919. County engineering surveys from 1931 described it as adequate for light wagon traffic, stable construction, regular maintenance evident. This detail becomes significant. On January 19th, 4 days into the storm, the bridge collapsed. According to the investigation report filed by Sheriff Morton Webb on February 3, 1933, the collapse appeared to be the result of ice accumulation and structural stress. However, the report includes a handwritten marginal note, barely legible, saw marks, inconclusive. This notation was never explained in subsequent documentation. With the bridge down and snow depths exceeding 4 feet, the Ravenhood family was completely isolated. The nearest neighbor, a farmer named Dutch Kohler, lived 2.5 miles east. The town of Millworth, population 612, lay 14 miles southwest along roads that were impassable. What happened next is documented through 3 primary sources: the surviving testimony of Daniel Ravenhood, age 14, the investigation report compiled by Sheriff Webb, and a detailed account written by Dr. Philip Ashcroft, the county medical examiner, which was published in the Journal of Forensic Medicine in December 1933 under the title Anomalous Findings in a Multiple Fatality Incident. Daniel Ravenhood's testimony was given on January 23, 1933, approximately 14 hours after he was discovered by Dutch Kohler. The boy was found walking along the main road at dawn, 7 miles from the Ravenhood property. He wore no coat. His feet were wrapped in blood-stained cloth. The temperature that morning was negative 11 degrees Fahrenheit. According to the transcription preserved in the Westmoreland County Sheriff's Department archives, Daniel told investigators the following. The storm had ended on the evening of January 18th. The family gathered in the main parlor after supper. His father was reading. His mother was mending. Thomas was writing letters. Eleanor was playing hymns on the piano. The twins were playing checkers near the fireplace. At approximately 8:40 in the evening, they heard knocking at the front door. Daniel stated the knocking was wrong. When pressed by Sheriff Webb to clarify, the boy said it came in sets of 7 knocks, repeated 3 times, with long pauses between each set. His father, Cornelius, initially ignored it, assuming it was wind-blown debris. But the knocking continued, identical in rhythm and intensity. Cornelius finally rose and opened the door. According to Daniel, there was no one visible on the front porch. However, his father stood in the doorway for several minutes, looking out into the darkness beyond the porch light. When he finally closed the door, Daniel testified that his father's expression had changed. He appeared confused, then frightened. Cornelius locked the door, checked every window on the ground floor, and ordered everyone upstairs to their bedrooms immediately. He provided no explanation despite repeated questions from his wife and children. At this point, Daniel's testimony becomes difficult to follow. The transcript indicates multiple interruptions, instances where the boy became non-responsive, and sections where Sheriff Webb noted witness unable or unwilling to continue. What can be extracted is this. The family went upstairs. Daniel shared a bedroom with his brother Samuel on the 3rd floor. At some point during the night, Daniel heard screaming from the 2nd floor, where his parents and Eleanor slept. Then silence. He stated that Samuel told him to remain in the room, to not open the door regardless of what he heard. Samuel locked the door from inside and wedged a chair beneath the handle. The twins remained in that room for what Daniel estimated was 2 days, though he admitted his sense of time had become confused. They had no food. They melted snow from the window ledge for water. They heard footsteps in the hallway outside their door multiple times. They heard their mother's voice calling for them. They heard their father's voice. They heard Eleanor. Samuel told Daniel that it was not truly them. On the 3rd day, the footsteps stopped. The house became silent. Samuel finally opened the door. The hallway was empty and dark. All the lamps had been extinguished. The testimony becomes incoherent at this point. Daniel described finding Thomas in the library on the 1st floor. He described conditions that Dr. Ashcroft would later confirm, but which Sheriff Webb attempted to exclude from the official record. Daniel stated that Samuel told him to run, to leave the house immediately and not look back. Daniel climbed out a 1st-floor window and began walking toward town. He never saw Samuel again. When Dutch Kohler found the boy on the morning of January 23rd, Daniel was hypothermic, dehydrated, and suffering from severe frostbite on both feet. He was transported to Millworth Community Hospital, where Dr. Ashcroft examined him and documented his physical condition as inconsistent with exposure timeline described. Sheriff Webb organized a party of 6 men and traveled to the Ravenhood property on the afternoon of January 23rd. They found the front door standing open. Snow had drifted into the entrance hall. They discovered 5 bodies. Cornelius Ravenhood was found in the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, lying in bed. Cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest. However, Dr. Ashcroft's private notes, which were not discovered until 1967, describe extensive subcutaneous hemorrhaging inconsistent with natural death, no external wounds evident, facial expression of extreme terror. Margaret Ravenhood was found in the hallway outside the master bedroom. Official cause of death, accidental fall, skull fracture. Dr. Ashcroft's notes describe the position of the body as anatomically impossible, given the stated mechanism of injury. Eleanor Ravenhood was found in her bedroom, sitting in a chair facing the window. Cause of death was listed as unknown, possibly hypothermia. The window was closed. The room temperature was noted as 68 degrees Fahrenheit due to the still functioning heating stove. Thomas Ravenhood was found in the library on the 1st floor. Sheriff Webb's report states, self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head, Cornelius's revolver found at scene. Dr. Ashcroft's official autopsy report confirms this finding. His private notes, however, contain a single sentence: powder burns inconsistent, entry angle impossible if self-inflicted. Sarah Ravenhood was found in the kitchen sitting at the table. A teacup sat in front of her. Cause of death was listed as poisoning, substance undetermined. Toxicology analysis was never completed. Samuel Ravenhood was not found. The search party spent 3 hours in the house. According to testimony from 2 members of the party, Deputy Frank Morrison and civilian volunteer James Whitmore, there were additional details that Sheriff Webb declined to include in the official report. All of the clocks in the house had stopped at different times. Several interior doors were locked from the outside, with the keys still in the locks. The piano in the parlor was open, with several keys depressed as if fingers still rested on them. And in the snow around the house, there were footprints. The footprints circled the entire structure, always exactly 7 feet from the foundation. They were small, approximately the size of a child's, but according to James Whitmore's statement, given in 1971 to researcher Dr. Helena Vance, they didn't walk. The prints were all in a line, like something had been dragged, or like something had been sliding along the snow. The investigation was officially closed on February 7, 1933. The findings were filed as multiple deaths by natural and accidental causes during severe weather isolation. Daniel Ravenhood was placed in the care of his maternal aunt in Ohio. He never returned to Pennsylvania. He never spoke publicly about that week again. The property remained abandoned. The official investigation into the Ravenhood deaths was conducted between January 23rd and February 7, 1933, under the direction of Sheriff Morton Webb, who had served Westmoreland County for 11 years. According to personnel records housed at the Pennsylvania State Police Historical Archives, Webb was known as a competent, by-the-book officer with an exemplary record. He had investigated 17 deaths during his tenure, all resolved satisfactorily. The Ravenhood case would be his last. The initial response team consisted of Sheriff Webb, Deputy Frank Morrison, Dr. Philip Ashcroft, County Medical Examiner, and 4 civilian volunteers from Millworth: James Whitmore, Robert Sykes, Dutch Kohler, and Thomas Brennan. Their testimony, compiled from various sources including official reports, personal correspondence, and later interviews, reveals significant inconsistencies that were never addressed in the final investigation. Deputy Morrison's official statement, filed January 24, 1933, describes the scene as orderly, no signs of struggle or forced entry. Deceased appear to have died peacefully in most cases. However, a letter Morrison wrote to his brother in Philadelphia, dated February 12, 1933, and preserved in the Morrison family papers donated to Villanova University in 1989, tells a markedly different story. In this letter, Morrison writes, "I cannot sleep, John. I see that house every time I close my eyes. Morton made us swear we would stick to the official story, said it would cause panic if people knew the truth. But there was nothing peaceful about what we found. The expressions on their faces, John. Mrs. Ravenhood's body was bent backward at an angle that isn't natural, and the smell in that house was not just death. It was something else, something sweet and rotten at the same time, like flowers left too long in a closed room. The medical examination of the bodies presents the first major inconsistency. Dr. Ashcroft performed preliminary examinations at the scene on January 23rd, followed by formal autopsies at Millworth Community Hospital on January 24th and 25th. His official reports filed with the county list straightforward causes of death. But in December 1933, Dr. Ashcroft published his article in the Journal of Forensic Medicine, and while he never explicitly names the Ravenhood case, the details are unmistakable. The article describes a multiple fatality incident involving 6 deceased and 1 survivor, and details several anomalous findings. Dr. Ashcroft notes that all 5 recovered bodies showed signs of extreme physiological stress response, despite the varied listed causes of death. Blood work revealed elevated cortisol and adrenaline levels, consistent with prolonged terror response. He also documented what he termed subcutaneous microfractures in 4 of the 5 bodies, describing them as hairline fractures throughout the skeletal system, as if subjected to extreme pressure from all directions simultaneously. Most disturbing was his analysis of liver temperatures taken at the scene. According to standard forensic procedure, Dr. Ashcroft measured core body temperature to establish time of death. His notes indicate that all 5 bodies showed liver temperatures of 41 degrees Fahrenheit, despite being in rooms where ambient temperatures ranged from 62 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. This temperature is impossibly low for recent death and suggests the bodies had been subjected to freezing conditions, yet there was no evidence of environmental exposure inside the heated house. The investigation of the physical property raised additional questions. According to Sheriff Webb's report, the house showed no signs of forced entry. All windows were locked from inside. The front door, while found open on January 23rd, showed no damage to the lock or frame. Food in the kitchen had been recently prepared, beds were made, personal belongings were undisturbed. However, civilian volunteer James Whitmore maintained until his death in 1978 that there were details Sheriff Webb deliberately excluded from the official record. In a recorded interview conducted by local historian Patricia Drummond in 1974, preserved in the Westmoreland County Historical Society audio archives, Whitmore states, "Morton saw the same things we saw. The scratches on the inside of Eleanor's bedroom door, down low, near the floor, like someone had been clawing to get out, or something had been clawing to get in. The position of Thomas's body in the library, how the blood spatter didn't match a self-inflicted wound. And the basement. Morton told us not to go down there, said there was nothing to see, but Robert Sykes went anyway. He came back up white as a sheet and wouldn't speak for an hour." Robert Sykes died in 1945, and no record of his testimony regarding the basement exists. However, property records from the eventual sale of the Ravenhood estate in 1948 include an inspection report noting, "Basement sealed with concrete, reason unknown, recommend structural assessment before disturbing." The search for Samuel Ravenhood continued for 3 weeks following the discovery of the bodies. Search parties combed the surrounding forest in expanding grids. The frozen creek was examined. Abandoned mining shafts in the area were explored. No trace of the 22-year-old man was ever found. On February 2, 1933, searchers discovered something in the woods approximately 1 mile north of the Ravenhood property. According to a brief mention in Sheriff Webb's notes, they found personal effects belonging to Samuel Ravenhood, including wallet, pocket watch, and eyeglasses. The items were found arranged in a neat pile on a flat rock, covered by a thin layer of snow. The rock, according to volunteer Thomas Brennan, was in the center of a small clearing where the snow appeared to have been pressed down in a circle like something had been spinning there. This finding was noted but not investigated further. The items were returned to the Ravenhood estate. The testimony of Daniel Ravenhood, the sole survivor, became increasingly problematic for the official investigation. The boy was interviewed 3 times, initially on January 23rd while hospitalized, again on January 26th after his physical condition stabilized, and finally on January 31st before being released to his aunt's custody. Transcripts of these interviews, preserved in sealed court records that were opened to researchers in 1983 under Pennsylvania's 50-year disclosure law, show significant discrepancies between sessions. In the first interview, Daniel provided the account described earlier. In the second interview, conducted by Sheriff Webb alone without witnesses, Daniel recanted several details. He stated he could not remember clearly, that he had been confused, that perhaps he had dreamed some of what he reported. The third interview, conducted by Dr. Ashcroft and a court-appointed psychologist, Dr. Ernest Marlowe, shows Daniel reverting to his original testimony, but adding details he had not mentioned before. He described sounds from the walls of the house, voices that spoke in unison, and a figure he saw from the third-floor window on the night his brother told him to run. A figure standing at the edge of the tree line, impossibly tall and perfectly still. Dr. Marlowe's assessment, filed January 31, 1933, concludes, subject shows signs of severe psychological trauma, consistent with witnessed deaths of family members. Some described experiences may be dissociative episodes or protective fantasy construction. However, subject's conviction regarding events is unshakable and appears genuine. Recommend long-term psychiatric care and removal from environment associated with trauma. The final element of the initial investigation concerns the local community's reaction. According to editions of the Millworth Gazette from February 1933, preserved on microfilm at the Pennsylvania State Library, public sentiment quickly turned to fear and suspicion. The newspaper published several letters to the editor demanding answers. One letter, published February 9, 1933, signed by concerned citizens, reads in part, "We have lived in this valley for generations. We know its dangers and its secrets. The Ravenhood property has a history that Morton Webb knows well but will not speak of. 3 families lived there before the Ravenhoods. All left suddenly. Some did not leave at all. Our grandparents knew to stay away from that land. Cornelius Ravenhood was warned. He chose not to listen." Sheriff Webb responded publicly only once, in a statement printed February 11, 1933. "The deaths of the Ravenhood family are a tragedy, but not a mystery. Isolation, severe weather, and unfortunate accidents combine to produce this outcome. Rumors and superstitions serve no purpose and dishonor the dead. This case is closed." On February 15, 1933, Sheriff Morton Webb resigned his position, citing health reasons. He was 41 years old. According to medical records from Westmoreland County Hospital, acquired through estate settlement after his death, Webb was treated for acute anxiety disorder and insomnia beginning February 8, 1933. He was prescribed sedatives and advised to take medical leave. Webb moved to Ohio in March 1933. He died in 1941 at age 49. His death certificate lists cause of death as suicide by hanging. Among his personal effects, discovered by his landlord and turned over to local police, was a journal. Most entries are mundane, but the final entry, dated one day before his death, reads, "I should have burned that house to the ground. I should have salted the earth. It is still there. It is still waiting. God forgive me, I left it there." The journal was never entered into any official record and was considered the rambling of a disturbed mind. It was destroyed by the Ohio Police Department in 1943 as part of routine evidence disposal. The Ravenhood property was seized by Westmoreland County for unpaid taxes in 1936. It was sold at auction in 1948 to a Philadelphia investment company for $600. The house stood empty for another decade. The Ravenhood case remained largely forgotten until the spring of 1967, when Dr. Helena Vance, an assistant professor of American history at Carnegie Mellon University, stumbled upon a reference to it while researching rural Pennsylvania during the Great Depression. In her book Forgotten Tragedies, Pennsylvania's Lost Histories, published in 1982, Dr. Vance describes finding a single paragraph mention in a 1934 WPA report about the economic impact of abandoned properties in Westmoreland County. Intrigued by the sparse details and the abrupt closure of the investigation, Dr. Vance began what would become a 15-year obsession with the Ravenhood case. Her research methodology, was meticulous. She obtained access to sealed court records, tracked down surviving family members of the investigation team, interviewed elderly Millworth residents who remembered the incident, and conducted extensive archival research across 4 states. Dr. Vance's personal papers, donated to Carnegie Mellon University Library Special Collections after her death in 1983, contain over 2,000 pages of notes, correspondence, interviews, and photographs related to the Ravenhood case. They also contain details that she deliberately excluded from her published work, details her colleagues would later describe as too disturbing for academic publication. In June 1967, Dr. Vance conducted her first interview with James Whitmore, then 72 years old and living in a nursing home in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. The recorded interview, lasting 3 hours and 17 minutes, represents the most detailed first-hand account of the crime scene available. Whitmore, knowing he was dying, he passed away in 1978, was willing to speak freely about what he witnessed. According to the transcript, Whitmore described entering the Ravenhood house and immediately feeling what he termed a wrongness in the air. He stated, "It wasn't just that people had died there. I'd seen death before. This was different. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath, like it was waiting for us to leave so it could exhale." Whitmore confirmed the details about the scratches on Eleanor's door, the impossible angle of Margaret Ravenhood's body, and the inconsistencies with Thomas's supposed suicide. But he also revealed information that never appeared in any official document. He stated that in the master bedroom where Cornelius Ravenhood was found, the wallpaper was peeling away from the walls in long strips, despite the house being well maintained. On the exposed wall beneath, Whitmore claimed they found marks, like someone had been drawing with charcoal the same symbol repeated over and over, hundreds of times. When Dr. Vance asked what symbol, Whitmore drew it for her. The drawing exists in her papers, a circle with 7 lines radiating from it, each line ending in a smaller circle. Whitmore stated he had never seen anything like it before or since. Sheriff Webb had ordered the wallpaper reattached and forbade anyone from mentioning it. Most significantly, Whitmore described what Robert Sykes had seen in the basement. According to Whitmore, Sykes found the dirt floor of the basement had been recently disturbed, as if something had been digging up from below. In the center of the floor was a hole, approximately 3 feet in diameter and of unknown depth. Sykes had dropped a stone into it and never heard it hit bottom. Around the hole carved into the packed earth was the same symbol found on the bedroom wall, only much larger, with the hole at its center. Sheriff Webb had ordered the basement sealed that same day, before the bodies were even removed from the house. Dr. Vance attempted to verify this account, but found that the basement had been filled with concrete in 1948 prior to the property sale, and structural modifications in 1962 made access impossible without major demolition. County records provide no explanation for why the basement was sealed. In 1969, Dr. Vance located Daniel Ravenhood, then 50 years old and living under an assumed name in Columbus, Ohio. She sent multiple letters requesting an interview. Daniel refused all contact. However, in March 1970, he finally agreed to speak with her on the condition that the interview would never be published during his lifetime and that his current identity would remain confidential. The interview took place in a Columbus hotel room on March 15, 1970. Dr. Vance's notes described Daniel as deeply traumatized, clearly suffering from lifelong psychological damage, but adamant that his story must be preserved. The interview lasted 6 hours over 2 days. The recordings were sealed at Daniel's request and were only opened after his death in 1995. The content of these recordings, transcribed and analyzed by Dr. Michael Reeves of Ohio State University in 1998, contains details that Daniel never provided to investigators in 1933. According to this account, the knocking at the door on the night of January 18th was not random. Daniel stated it spelled out words in a code his father recognized, though Daniel did not understand it at the time. Cornelius Ravenhood's reaction was not confusion, but recognition and horror. Daniel described the 2 days he and Samuel spent locked in the third-floor bedroom in explicit detail. They heard their mother's voice calling them to come downstairs for meals. They heard their father's voice reading the Bible aloud, but the passages were wrong, inverted, spoken backward. They heard Eleanor playing the piano, the same hymn repeated for hours, getting slower and slower until each note was separated by minutes of silence. Samuel told Daniel that their father had found something in the forest years earlier, something he should have left alone. Samuel would not elaborate, only that their father had made a mistake, and now they were paying for it. On the night Samuel told Daniel to run, Daniel stated that his brother made him promise something. He made Daniel swear that he would never speak their family name aloud again, that he would never return to Pennsylvania, and that if anyone ever asked him what he saw from the window that final night, he was to tell them he saw nothing. But Daniel did see something, and in 1970, 37 years later, he finally described it to Dr. Vance. He saw a figure standing at the tree line, approximately 70 feet from the house. It was tall, taller than any man, perhaps 8 or 9 feet in height. It was perfectly motionless despite the wind. It appeared to be wearing clothing, but the clothing was wrong, old-fashioned, like from a much earlier time. And though the figure was too far away for Daniel to see clearly in the darkness, he was absolutely certain it was looking directly at him, at the third-floor window where he stood. Then 7 more figures emerged from the forest, forming a circle around the first. They stood perfectly still, perfectly spaced, and Daniel realized they had been there all along, that they had been standing there for days, waiting. Samuel pulled him away from the window and told him it was time to go, that they would not wait any longer. Daniel fled the house and never looked back. He never saw Samuel again, and for 62 years, until his death, he never spoke the name Ravenhood aloud. Dr. Vance's investigation expanded beyond interviews. In 1971, she obtained permission to examine the property records of the land where the Ravenhood house stood. The deed history revealed that the property had been occupied by 5 different families between 1847 and 1919, when Cornelius Ravenhood purchased it. The first family, the Harlows, arrived in 1847. Census records show Michael Harlow, his wife Catherine, and their 4 children. The 1850 census shows Catherine Harlow and 1 child. No death records exist for Michael Harlow or the 3 missing children. The property was abandoned. The second family, the Winchesters, purchased the land in 1858. Jonathan Winchester, a surveyor from Philadelphia, his wife and 2 sons. In 1862, during the Civil War, the property was again abandoned. Jonathan Winchester was found dead on the property by Union soldiers passing through the area. The official report, preserved in Civil War military records, states, "Deceased found in cellar, cause of death unknown, body partially consumed by animals." His wife and sons were never located. The third occupants were the Blackwell family, 1871-1879. Richard and Constance Blackwell, both schoolteachers, and their daughter. In 1879, all 3 disappeared. The property was discovered abandoned by a mail carrier. Personal belongings were left behind, including money and jewelry. No investigation was conducted. The property reverted to county ownership. The 4th family was the Morlands, 1885-1893. Henry Morland, a veteran of the Union Army, his second wife, and her son from a previous marriage. In February 1893, neighbors became concerned when the family failed to appear in town for several weeks. A search party found the house locked from inside. When they forced entry, they found Henry Morland dead in the upstairs bedroom. His wife and stepson were never found. The death was ruled natural causes, though the attending physician noted circumstances unusual. Then came the Ravenhoods in 1919. Cornelius purchased the property at auction for $800, a remarkably low price for a house of that size. Local records indicate he was aware of the property's history, but dismissed it as superstition. Dr. Vance discovered one additional document that changed the trajectory of her research. In the Pennsylvania State Archives, in a collection of letters from early settlers donated by the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, she found correspondence from a missionary named Reverend Elijah Corbin, dated 1841. Corbin was traveling through western Pennsylvania, establishing Presbyterian churches in remote communities. In a letter to the church board in Philadelphia, Corbin describes encountering a small Native American settlement in the area that would later become Millworth. He writes, "The people here speak of a place in the forest they will not approach, a valley they say belongs to the first people, though they themselves are the first people I have met. They tell stories of a doorway in the earth, a place where the boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead grows thin. They perform ceremonies at the edge of this valley, but they will not enter it. They say that long ago someone opened the door and could not close it again." The coordinates Corbin provides in his letter, when plotted on modern maps, correspond to the location of the Ravenhood property. Dr. Vance spent the summer of 1972 conducting archaeological research on the property with permission from the current owners, a Pittsburgh development company. Using ground-penetrating radar, her team discovered multiple anomalies beneath the house, including what appeared to be a natural cave system and evidence of human construction predating any known settlement in the area. On August 12, 1972, Dr. Vance and two graduate students, Martin Chen and Rebecca Stoller, entered the cave system through an entrance discovered in the forest approximately 200 feet from where the house had stood. The original structure had been demolished in 1968. The trio spent 4 hours exploring and documenting the caves. According to Chen's field notes, preserved in the Carnegie Mellon archives, they found evidence of habitation, carved symbols on the walls, the remains of fires, and what appeared to be deliberate structural modifications to the natural cave formations. The symbols matched the drawing provided by James Whitmore. At the deepest point of the cave system, approximately 60 feet underground, they discovered a chamber. The chamber was roughly circular, 30 feet in diameter with a domed ceiling. The walls were covered in carvings. In the center of the floor was a depression, a perfect circle approximately 4 feet across and of unknown depth. Dr. Vance photographed the chamber extensively. The photographs exist in her papers and show intricate spiral patterns carved into every surface, all leading toward the depression in the floor. Rebecca Stoller later testified that as they were preparing to leave the chamber, Dr. Vance approached the depression and looked into it. Stoller stated that Dr. Vance stood there for several minutes, perfectly still, then suddenly stepped back and said they needed to leave immediately. They returned to the surface and sealed the cave entrance. Dr. Vance discontinued the archaeological survey without explanation. In her field notes from that day, there is only one entry. "We should not have come here. Some doors are closed for a reason." Dr. Vance spent the next 11 years compiling her research, but published only a sanitized version in her 1982 book. The book presents the Ravenhood case as an interesting historical mystery, but omits all references to the cave system, the pattern of deaths on the property, and the Native American accounts. Her colleague at Carnegie Mellon, Dr. Robert Ashford, later stated in a 1990 interview with Pennsylvania History Quarterly that Dr. Vance had become increasingly disturbed by her findings in the final years of her life. She told him that she had discovered something in the caves that convinced her the property should be completely avoided, that the development company should be warned away, and that certain knowledge was dangerous to possess. On October 3, 1983, Dr. Helena Vance failed to appear for her scheduled lecture at Carnegie Mellon. Her office was found locked, her apartment was undisturbed, her car in its usual parking space. An investigation found no evidence of foul play or intention to disappear. Dr. Vance was never seen again. Among her papers sealed until 1990, investigators found a final journal entry dated October 2, 1983. "I understand now what Cornelius found. I understand what Samuel saw. I understand why Daniel never spoke the name. The door is still open. It has always been open. And I cannot stop thinking about it. I can hear it calling, even here, 50 miles away. I know I should not go back. But I must see. I must know for certain. If I do not return, burn my research. Please, burn it all." Her research was not burned. It was archived. The disappearance of Dr. Helena Vance in 1983 should have ended the academic investigation into the Ravenhood case. Instead, it sparked renewed interest from a new generation of researchers, journalists, and paranormal investigators. More significantly, It coincided with a series of incidents in Westmoreland County that authorities have struggled to explain. The property where the Ravenhood house once stood was purchased in 1985 by Meridian Development Corporation, a Pittsburgh-based company specializing in rural land conversion. According to corporate records obtained through Pennsylvania's right-to-know law, Meridian intended to develop the 127-acre parcel into a small residential community called Whispering Pines Estates. The project never moved beyond initial surveying. In June 1986, a four-person surveying team from Hutchins Engineering arrived on the property to establish lot boundaries and assess infrastructure requirements. The crew consisted of lead surveyor Thomas Mackey, age 34, assistant surveyor Jennifer Hollis, age 27, and two technicians, David Ruiz and Patrick Kemper, both in their early 20s. The crew maintained regular radio contact with their office in Greensburg throughout the day. According to communication logs preserved in court documents from the subsequent litigation, the last transmission was received at 4:47 p.m. on June 18, 1986. Jennifer Hollis reported they had completed the eastern boundary survey and were preparing to return to their vehicles. When the crew failed to return that evening, a search was initiated. Their two trucks were found parked at the access road exactly where they had left them. Equipment was laid out in an organized manner. Personal belongings were undisturbed. The Pennsylvania State Police coordinated a search involving 42 personnel, including K-9 units, and a helicopter with thermal imaging. The search continued for 8 days. On June 26th, Patrick Kemper was discovered walking along State Route 981, approximately 11 miles from the property. He was dehydrated, suffering from exposure, and in severe psychological distress. According to the incident report filed by Pennsylvania State Police Corporal James Dietrich, preserved in State Police Archives in Harrisburg, Kemper was unable or unwilling to provide a coherent account of what occurred. Medical evaluation at Westmoreland Hospital revealed no physical injuries beyond dehydration and minor lacerations on his hands and feet. However, psychiatric evaluation noted acute dissociative disorder, possible psychotic break, patient non-responsive to questioning about recent events. Kemper spent 3 weeks in psychiatric care at Western Psychiatric Hospital in Pittsburgh. Upon release, he refused all interviews and relocated to Oregon. In 1994, he died by suicide. He left no note. The other 3 members of the surveying crew were never found. The search was officially concluded on July 15, 1986. The case remains open with Pennsylvania State Police as a missing persons investigation. Meridian Development Corporation quietly abandoned the Whispering Pines project. The property was sold in 1988 to a private conservation trust for $1. The trust, according to its charter filed with Pennsylvania Department of State, was established to preserve sensitive ecological areas in perpetuity. The property has remained undeveloped and officially closed to public access since 1988. However, public access restrictions have not prevented unauthorized entry. Between 1986 and the present day, Pennsylvania State Police have responded to 47 separate incidents on or near the former Ravenhood property. These incidents are documented in police records obtained through multiple right-to-know requests filed by investigative journalist Marcus Webb, no relation to Sheriff Morton Webb, between 2015 and 2018. The incidents follow a disturbing pattern. They occur most frequently between January and February, the same period when the Ravenhood deaths occurred. They typically involve individuals or small groups who enter the property despite posted warnings. In many cases, responding officers find abandoned vehicles and personal belongings, but no individuals. In other cases, individuals are found in states of severe psychological distress, unable or unwilling to explain their experiences. 3 incidents warrant particular attention. In February 1991, 2 Penn State graduate students conducting an unauthorized paranormal investigation entered the property with video recording equipment. Their vehicle was found 3 days later. The video camera was recovered, still running, battery depleted. The footage, which was entered into evidence and later obtained by Marcus Webb through legal channels, shows the 2 students walking through the forest at dusk. At timestamp 1:47:22, Both students stop walking simultaneously. One of them says, "Do you hear that?" The other responds, "The knocking." For the next 43 seconds, both stand motionless. Then both begin walking towards something off-camera. The video continues for another 16 minutes, showing only forest canopy as if the camera has been dropped or set down. At timestamp 2:03:51, a sound is audible on the recording. Multiple audio analysts have examined this sound. The consensus description is, "Rhythmic knocking, 7 strikes repeated 3 times. The video ends. The students were never found. In January 1998, a Pennsylvania Game Commission officer, Daniel Fust, responded to a report of gunshots on the property. Fust was an experienced officer with 14 years of service. According to his incident report, filed January 19, 1998, he entered the property at approximately 3:30 p.m. following a marked trail. At 4:15 p.m., he radioed that he had found evidence of recent campfire activity and was investigating further. At 4:47 p.m., he radioed again. The transmission, preserved in Game Commission records, consists of heavy breathing and a single sentence. "There's something wrong with the trees here." No further transmissions were received. A search team found Fust 6 hours later, approximately 1 mile from where he had made his last transmission. He was sitting at the base of a tree, his service weapon drawn, pointing into the forest. He was unresponsive. Medical evaluation found him physically unharmed, but in a catatonic state. Fust remained in psychiatric care for 11 months. He never returned to active duty. In a 2003 interview with a local newspaper, one of the few times he spoke publicly about the incident, Fust stated, "I saw the trees moving, not from wind. They were moving toward me, closing in. And I heard voices from the ground beneath my feet, like people were buried alive and calling out. I know how that sounds. I know what the doctors think. But I was there. I know what I heard." The third incident occurred in February 2007 and involved local teenagers. 4 high school students from Millworth entered the property on a dare. All 4 were found the following morning by their parents, who had organized a private search after the teens failed to return home. The teenagers were found together, sitting in a circle in a small clearing, holding hands, unresponsive. All 4 were hospitalized and recovered physically within 24 hours. The teenagers initially refused to discuss what had occurred. However, one of them, Ashley Morrison, granddaughter of Deputy Frank Morrison, eventually provided an account to a school counselor. According to the counselor's notes, obtained by Marcus Webb through sources he declined to identify, Ashley described hearing music coming from beneath the ground, voices singing in unison, and seeing lights moving between the trees. She stated that all 4 teenagers felt compelled to follow the lights deeper into the forest until they reached a clearing where the ground was wrong. She described the earth as breathing, rising and falling like it was alive. The 4 teenagers then sat in a circle, she claimed, because they felt if they broke the circle, something would happen to them. They sat there for 7 hours until sunrise, when the feeling finally lifted and they were able to move again. All 4 teenagers left Millworth within a year of the incident. None have returned. The most recent documented incident occurred in January 2019. A YouTuber specializing in paranormal content, operating under the username NightwalkerPA, entered the property with recording equipment to create content about the Ravenhood legend. He was live streaming the exploration to approximately 3,000 viewers. The stream, which was preserved by multiple viewers and subsequently analyzed by several independent researchers, shows approximately 47 minutes of the YouTuber walking through the forest, discussing the history of the property and responding to viewer comments. At timestamp 47:14, he stops walking and says, "Did you guys hear that in the audio?" Multiple viewers in the live chat confirm they heard something. The YouTuber enhances his audio and replays the last 30 seconds. Our sound is clearly audible beneath his narration. Rhythmic knocking, 7 strikes repeated 3 times. The YouTuber appears excited by this development and continues deeper into the forest, following his GPS toward the coordinates where the house once stood. At timestamp 13:52, his camera begins experiencing interference, the image breaking up repeatedly. At timestamp 1419, the image stabilizes briefly, and in the background of the frame, barely visible between trees, a figure appears to be standing motionless. The YouTuber does not appear to notice the figure. He continues walking. The figure remains perfectly still. At timestamp 10447, the live stream ends abruptly. The YouTuber's vehicle was found the following day. His recording equipment was never recovered. He remains missing. The investigation is ongoing. Beyond these documented incidents, there are numerous anecdotal reports from residents of Millworth and surrounding communities. The current population of Millworth, according to 2020 census data, is 437, less than it was in 1933. Many long-time residents have left. Those who remain speak reluctantly about the property and only when pressed. In interviews conducted by Marcus Webb between 2016 and 2018, several patterns emerge from resident testimonies. Multiple individuals report hearing sounds from the direction of the property during winter nights. Knocking, music, voices. Several residents describe seeing lights moving through the forest, though the property has no electrical service and no authorized human presence. One retired postal worker, Gerald Hastings, age 73, stated, "My grandfather told me that land was wrong before white people ever came here. The native folks knew it. They tried to warn the settlers, but nobody listened. Still not listening." Perhaps most disturbing are reports from Pennsylvania state forest rangers who patrol the surrounding state game lands. While none would speak on record, off-record conversations reveal a common practice. Rangers avoid the former Ravenhood property, especially between January and February. Radio communication becomes unreliable near the property. GPS devices malfunction. Compasses spin erratically. And there is what rangers refer to as the feeling, a sensation of being watched, of being unwelcome, that increases in intensity the closer one approaches to where the house once stood. In 2018, Marcus Webb petitioned the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to release any incident reports related to the property. The request was denied, with DCNR citing ongoing investigations and public safety concerns. Webb appealed the denial. During the appeals process, DCNR filed a brief stating that releasing the information could encourage dangerous trespassing and potentially lead to additional disappearances. The appeal was denied. The property remains closed to public access. Warning signs have been upgraded multiple times, most recently in 2021. The current signage reads, "No trespassing, dangerous conditions. Violators will be prosecuted. Emergency contact, PA State Police." The emergency contact information was added after the 2019 disappearance. Despite these warnings, people continue to enter the property. Some are drawn by curiosity about the historical case. Others are paranormal enthusiasts seeking evidence of supernatural activity. A few are researchers attempting to understand what connection, if any, exists between the events of 1933 and contemporary incidents. None have provided satisfactory explanations. None have discovered what lies beneath the earth in that valley, and some have not returned to provide any explanation at all. The Pennsylvania State Police maintain an active case file on the property. According to sources within the department, there have been internal discussions about whether to request permanent closure and possibly fill in the cave system discovered by Dr. Vance in 1972. However, no action has been taken. The reasons for this inaction are not publicly documented. The property remains as it has been for over 3 decades. Closed, warning signs posted, officially protected as a nature preserve, but in truth, avoided. Those who know its history do not speak of it casually. Those who ignore its history often regret doing so. And every January, without fail, the sounds begin again, the knocking in the night, the lights between the trees. The sense that something beneath that ground is waiting, has always been waiting, and will continue to wait long after we are all gone. 6 members of the Ravenhood family entered the winter of 1933 together in their isolated home in western Pennsylvania. One survived, traumatized beyond healing, living under an assumed name until his death in 1995. 5 died under circumstances that defy complete explanation. One, Samuel Ravenhood, simply vanished, his fate unknown even now, 91 years later. The official investigation concluded it was tragedy compounded by isolation and severe weather. But the official investigation did not account for the pattern of deaths on that property, spanning nearly a century. It did not explain the symbols carved beneath the earth. It did not address what Daniel Ravenhood saw from the third-floor window that final night. And it certainly did not explain why people continue to disappear from that location to this very day. Dr. Helena Vance spent 15 years investigating this case. She descended into the caves beneath the property and discovered something that convinced her some knowledge is too dangerous to possess. She disappeared 40 years ago, last seen heading toward that same property. Her final words were a warning. Burn the research. We did not burn it. We preserved it. We continue to investigate. And people continue to vanish. If you live in Western Pennsylvania, you may know the property I am describing. If you are a researcher drawn to historical mysteries, you may be tempted to visit. If you are simply curious, you may wonder what truly lies beneath that forest floor. I will tell you what those who have lived near that land for generations already know. Stay away from that valley, especially during winter months. If you hear knocking in patterns of 7, do not investigate. If you see lights moving between trees where no lights should be, turn away. If you feel the earth beneath your feet is somehow wrong, leave immediately. Some doors once opened cannot be closed. Some places belong to forces we do not understand and cannot control. The Ravenhood property is one of those places. It was wrong in 1841. It was wrong in 1933. It is wrong today. Whatever waits beneath that ground is patient. It has waited for centuries. It will wait for centuries more. But it is waiting, and it is listening. And every winter when the temperature drops and the forest grows silent, it calls out in patterns of 7 knocks, repeated 3 times. If you hear that knocking, do not answer. Do not investigate. Do not go looking for explanations. Because some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some histories are better left buried, and some families should never have built their homes on cursed ground. The Ravenhood family learned that lesson too late. So did Dr. Helena Vance. So did the surveying crew in 1986, and the graduate students in 1991, and the YouTuber in 2019. How many more will it take before we finally understand? Before we finally listen to the warnings that have been given for nearly 2 centuries? That land is not ours. It never was. And whatever dwells beneath it will not rest until the door that was opened so long ago is finally, permanently sealed. Until then, the knocking will continue. The disappearances will continue. And the Ravenhood mystery will remain exactly what it has always been, a warning that we refuse to heed.